Hello everyone, and welcome again to today's video. Today is another subscriber driven video. They have a dog that is pretty dog aggressive, and they sent me quite a few different comments and questions that I felt would be better answered for them, and I'm sure that others out there are also struggling with this same thing. Also, while you're listening to me talk, this video that you're watching is of a dog that I trained, and you're going to see the progress of that dog all the way from the beginning, the very first lesson in the walk, all the way to the first day that it goes into public for the first time. And you're going to notice that the corrections I give throughout the training process, in the beginning there are quite a few, but as we move forward they get less and less and less to where they become almost non-existent, which is our goal anytime we train a dog to do a command. So let's get into answering these questions. So we are going to be covering, these are key points that I brought out of everything that they said and asked. So they asked about prong collar height on the neck. They also mentioned that they have a good loose leash walk with their dog until they see another dog, and then their dog becomes dog aggressive. They also said that the dog is getting used to the prong collar, which we are definitely going to cover that. They also said that the dog is better when the collar is on, and when the collar is off, the dog seems to be worse. Also, they have already been to 2 trainers, and they've been doing this obviously for a while and are getting frustrated because they love this dog and they want to be able to keep it. So in order to answer and cover all of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover some really important information that people need to know when it comes down to using a prong collar properly. If we're not on the same page when we're talking about this, then there's going to be things that I say that you are going to misunderstand, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So first off, the prong collar, believe it or not, is very important that you get the right one. Now, the one that I recommend is a Herm Springer, but that's the brand. And any dog that's roughly above 25-30 pounds, I recommend that you get the 3.0 millimeter size or the 3.2. I do not recommend the 2.25 for any dog above that weight. People that have big mastiffs and really heavy big dogs, a lot of times they think that they need to use the 4.0. I think that the size of the 4.0 millimeter is absolutely useless, and I believe that people just need to stay away from it. So the 3.0 and the 3.2 millimeter Herm Springer prong collar is the one that I recommend, because if you don't, you're already setting yourself up to struggle. The main reason why is because Herm Springer's prong collar is patented and nobody can copy it. The angle of their prongs is the best. And so it allows you to be able to use the collar for what it was designed for a lot easier than the collars that have the straighter prongs. Now, it's also important to understand that it's not the collar that makes the dog mind. So some people think that when a dog just pulls into it, it's supposed to be uncomfortable, so that way they're not pulling very hard. But that's not the case. The collar in itself is just a tool that allows us to be able to communicate to the dog in a way that they understand of when they're right and when they're wrong. Now, how we let them know when they're wrong is not by pulling on it, but by giving pop corrections. You'll notice every single correction I give in this video is a pop release. The collar pulls together, pinches the skin, and goes back to normal. How hard the correction is strictly determined by how hard I pop that leash and how fast I release it. So think of it this way. If I spoke a different language and you didn't understand that language, we would need a translator. Well, that's all this prong collar is. It's a translator that allows us to be able to speak the dog's language. But if we're not handling it or using it properly, you will not get the results that you're looking for, because it'd be like using a drill but not putting any bits in it, or a hammer, and instead of hitting it on the head, you're hitting it on the side. So it's important that you understand that The prong collar isn't, again, what makes the dog mind. It just allows you to be able to correct the dog at any level necessary that is determined by the dog itself, not us. Now let's cover real quick. Collar height on the neck. They said that every trainer that they've talked to has said to put the prong collar high on the neck. I'm not a fan of that. And the biggest reason why is because most dogs I train also get a hear command, which means that they're going to be wearing a remote. I want the remote on the smallest part of the neck, which is going to be right behind the head, because that collar is already going to be snug and I don't want it to get loose. So if it goes to slide down, all it's going to do is just get a little bit tighter. Now, anytime you have a prong collar fitted and it's holding on the smallest part of the neck, then that means that it's probably also too tight. There needs to be a little bit of wiggle room for the prong collar to be able to work properly. So what I would recommend is, if that's the case, add one extra link, so that way it has a little bit of room to kind of go down a little bit lower on the bottom side of the neck. But that's going to allow that collar to freely work as it was intended if you do that. Now let's talk about levels of correction. A lot of people think that the correction may be determined by the breed or the size of the dog or what they think is hard enough. But in reality, the dog determines the level of correction. So let me give you a scenario. If you went to reach for dessert and I slapped your hand and you didn't care about me slapping your hand, you're going to continue grabbing dessert. But if every time you reach for it, I start to up the level, and I do it a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, there's going to be a point when you're going to pull your hand back and say, you know what, the dessert isn't worth it. Therefore, I did not determine the level of correction. You did. And it's no different with a dog. Now, when a dog's adrenaline rushes, of course their pain tolerance is going to go up, and you're going to need to correct harder. And so there is a period of understanding where your dog's out, learning your dog, and learning what level they are at different moments in different situations that they may be doing something wrong in. So understand that when people ask me, how hard do I know to correct my dog? I always answer, your dog will tell you. If they didn't care about the correction, they're going to continue to do the action. And once they stop doing that action, you found your level of correction in that moment. Remember it, because you will come across a situation that is similar to that, and now you have a basis of where you need to go. So be aware of that as well. Corrections will change how hard they are depending on the situation that you're in. So, getting used to the collar. A dog will not get used to the collar if you do what I just said. Because again, you're not relying on your dog pulling into it. If you think your dog is getting used to the collar, all you're seeing is you're not correcting your dog hard enough. There's a lack of respect there. A punishment is only as good as the person wanting to avoid it. So we can apply that to dogs as well. Now, they said that the dog is better when the collar is on, and the dog actually acts a little worse when the collar is off. There's a thing out there about dogs becoming collar smart. Remember, all of this is a conditioning process. The conditioning process is that when you do something that I don't want you to do, I'm going to correct you, period. And I will be correcting you just hard enough that you're going to want to avoid it in the future. That is how we get away from corrections. That's why you're seeing the progress of this dog on the screen, where it's getting less and less and less corrections as time goes. I tell my clients also, maintain it the way I teach you for a year. Because in the year, the dog, in the beginning, they mind you to avoid the corrections, but over time, they start to mind you because they don't know any different. It's so solidified in their brain that they can't do an action that it doesn't benefit them to do it. So it gets to the point where they just quit thinking about it. It is a conditioning process, like when we learn how to drive a car. When we're driving a car for the very first time, we're checking the mirrors, we're making sure our seatbelt's on, we're making sure that we know where the gas pedal is and the brake. But I bet that over the last day or two, when you went out and drove your vehicle, the last thing you thought about was any of that. And because you've been conditioned to know just how to do it. It's kind of like being on autopilot, and that's where we want to get our dogs to. So how a dog becomes collar smart is when you think your dog is better than they are and you get away from it. And then they test it. Obviously there's no correction. And the next thing you know, you put the collar on and the dog goes, no, I still don't have to mind, and then you correct them. they start to associate all of that with the collars. And that's how dogs become collar smart. Once they're collar smart, it takes quite a while to condition them to be how I was talking about earlier, as far as them not being collar smart and knowing that they have to mind no matter what. So anytime anybody's using training equipment, understand that, again, it's just translators to be able to speak a language that they understand, their language that they understand, which is physical corrections. So be careful with that. That's a huge pitfall that people have. Now, when it comes down to a dog being aggressive, they talked about when they were walking their dogs and when they talk about the triggers happening. I like to call things for what they are, and that is your dog's dog aggressive. And what that means is that you need to socialize that dog, which means that you need to, and you're in the process of learning how to let that dog know what behavior is acceptable and what's unacceptable in any situation, whether it's inside the home or outside the home. So anytime our dog is doing something that they shouldn't do, we need to be able to learn how to correct them and let them know that that behavior is unacceptable. When you talk about having a loose leash on the walk and that your dog's obedience is pretty good, to be honest with you, you don't have obedience. And the reason why is because there's no black and white rules that your dog is understanding. If you watch this dog that I'm training or if you watch this dog in the video that I'm training, everything that I'm doing is laying down black and white rules. The rules of the walk, when I train it, is that they're not allowed to pay attention really to anything but you. They're in what's called migration mode. And I've talked about this in so many different videos. But the dog is learning and understanding that it isn't allowed to go sniff and do things. It isn't allowed to just wander off and say hi to people. It isn't allowed to say hi to other dogs. It's working. And so when we have these black and white rules, when we correct our dogs for doing something that they shouldn't do while they're in the walk, there is safety on our left. It benefits them to stay on our left. It benefits them to walk and follow with us. It's also the most natural thing in the world for them to do, because migration mode is part of one of three mindsets dogs have: hunting, tracking, migrating. So we're not asking or requiring the dog to do anything that they are not already designed to do, but there has to be rules. If you're walking your dog and everything is fine because nothing else is going around, but then when they see another dog, they act out and act aggressive, it's because there's zero respect for the rules of the command that you think you have. And again, that's not a put down. You've gone through 2 other trainers. You will never hear me say a bad thing about another trainer. And the reason why is because it's not necessary. 1, it's their own business. 2, they're only as good as the people that taught them and the experience that they have. I believe that every trainer out there has all the best goals and well wishes for the people that come to them for help. It doesn't mean that they're awful. It just means that they may not be able to understand or know how to handle every situation. So in the 23 plus years I've been doing this with over 5,000 dogs trained, this isn't anything new. This is every single dog that I get in for aggression. I put obedience on them. I put a walk on them. I put a down on them. I put a here on them. It's all guaranteed control, because the dog, I make it more important for the dog to mind me, which means that I'm also now allowed to be able to take them out and let them have a much better life than if I didn't have control and was risking the quality of their life because maybe they attacked another dog or a person and I have to now put that dog down. So part of keeping our dog safe is maintaining and learning how to have control in any situation. One more thing, when you struggle with a dog and it's dead set on doing an action and you're correcting and it's still doing it, just understand these are mental battles. Somebody's gonna win. It's either gonna be them or it's gonna be you. So it's really important that you do have a good understanding of why you're doing what you're doing and how to combat those situations. So no matter what, at any given time, you will always win. Because when it comes down to leading a dog, by nature, if you don't take the leadership role, they will. A dog can be compliant, but that doesn't mean that you're the leader. A leader, I have a great video of what leadership looks like through a dog's eyes, and I highly recommend that everybody that's watching this go watch that if you haven't already. But it's going to completely explain what I mean by having this control. And the stress relief, it is on the dog because they are no longer relying on their own shoulders to maintain safety. Now, one more thing to take into consideration. You got this dog for you guys. I bet you didn't get it for everybody else, and you didn't get it for everybody else's dogs for your dog to play with. I'm not a fan of strange dogs playing with strange dogs. I think that people run a risk of there being bigger issues. So when you're out in public and people ask if their dog can see your dog, the answer should be no. The reason why is because we don't know their other dog. You do know yours though. So from now on, what I would recommend that you say when somebody says, can I pet your dog or can my dog see yours? Say, you know what, thank you for asking, but they're working right now. Have a great day. And never quit walking. Another thing is this, sometimes if you, and only you can answer this, if you're feeling nervous in those situations prior to them happening, I promise you, your dog is feeling it also, which is going to put your dog on edge. So try to walk with as much confidence as possible. And if necessary, change directions, give yourself distance from the other dog, whatever it takes to make you feel better, but walk strong. And again, I do cover that in what leadership looks like through a dog's eyes. So I highly recommend that if you're looking to actually have your dog trained well, again, we have our 4-week training program on Patreon. It's going to really break it down, and it doesn't matter what training you've already had. It's going to override everything that you've already been doing with your dog, so that way you can have the success that it is you're looking for. And obviously, if you have any other questions, please feel free to let me know, and I want to be able to help you as much as possible. So again, everybody, thanks for watching. I hope this helps you have a much better relationship with your dog, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.